So far, we have given instructions to the Spring Framework on how to create our beans with the help of these at configuration and at bean annotation. But with these details alone, Spring Framework can't create the beans out of the box. The magic won't happen automatically. As we discussed previously, we need to take help from the Spring IOC container, and with the help of Spring IOC container, we need to initialize the Spring context. During the initialization of the Spring context with the help of Spring IOC container, Spring Framework will try to read this configuration and bean details, and in the same process, it is going to create the beans. So how to set up all this? Let's try to understand the same inside this lecture. I'm going to create a new package with the name main. So let me create a new package, and it is going to have the name as com.example.main. Inside this main package, I'm going to create a Java class. Let me mention this class name as Spring Main. It can be anything, but I'm trying to give some funny name here, which is Spring Main. Followed by, I want to create a main method inside this class. Because using this class only, I'm going to start my Spring project. For now, this is going to be a small project, which we always going to start with the help of main method. But once we start learning Spring Boot, our project is going to act as a web application, which is going to be deployed into a server during the startup of the application. We will go eventually there, but for now, let's keep things simple to learn the core concepts. Inside this file, I want to create the main method. To create the main method inside IntelliJ, we have a shortcut which is PSVM, public static void main. If you type this and press enter, you're going to have a empty main method. Inside this main method, I want to write the logic to create my Spring IOC container and initialize the Spring context. How to do that? It's very easy. You just have to create an object of a class. Just a few lectures back, we discussed inside Spring Framework, there are two types of IOC containers, Bean Factory and application context. Based upon our requirements, we can leverage any of these IOC containers. I'm going to use application context container in my scenario. If you try to search for application context inside the classes window, let me type application context. There is a interface with the name application context inside the Spring Framework. So this is an interface. Let's try to understand what are the implementation classes of this interface. Let me click on this arrow button, which is going to show all the implementations of application context. There are 12 different implementations. Based upon our business requirements or based upon our requirements, we need to choose one of the implementation class. For example, if you try to define all your configurations using XML, which is a legacy approach, you need to use this class path XML application context. But if you define this XML in some other file system location other than class path, then you need to use this file system XML application context. But in our scenario, we are using annotations approach. That's why we need to use this annotation config application context. So let me open this. We need to create the object of this class. Let me go to the Spring main class, and here I'm going to create a variable with the name context, and to this context I'm going to assign the object of annotation config application context. If I try to invoke the default constructor, then my Spring application will not know where my project config is present. That's why as an input to the constructor, I need to pass the class name where my configurations are present. Here, let me mention project config.class. With this single line, a big magic is going to happen behind the scenes. We are trying to create an object of this class. That means we are trying to initialize our Spring IOC container along with the Spring context. Once this initialization is completed, the IOC container will look for this project config file. And inside this project config file, we have mentioned at configuration and at bean annotation. So wherever my Spring IOC container sees this at bean annotation, all such objects will be converted as beans and maintained by the Spring Framework. I hope you're clear. Let's go to the Spring main. Here you may see var, which may be new to you. Var is a keyword introduced in Java 10. Let me try to mention some comments around var keyword. As I said, var keyword is introduced in Java 10. type inference is used in var keyword, in which it is going to detect automatically the data type of a variable based upon the surrounding context. Before this var keyword, developers, they used to mention what is the data type of this context by mentioning the class name like annotation, config, application context on both sides. But this is unnecessary because we're already mentioning these details on the right hand side after the new operator, just to help the developer to write some less code. This var keyword is present inside JavaScript from many years, but this is introduced in Java 10. The data type of this context will be decided by the Java compiler based upon the surrounding context. Here the surrounding context means the class name that we have defined after the new operator. With this, I'm telling the beans will be created by the Spring framework and they are going to be maintained. But you may ask me a proof. Show me the proof. How do I believe you? This can be your questions. Let's try to clarify these questions. Using these context object, I can try to invoke a method with the name getBean. To this getBean method, I can pass what is the data type of the bean that I'm trying to fetch. So the data type of my bean will be vehicle.class. Since I have passed vehicle.class to this getBean method behind the scenes, the Spring IOC container will check inside the memory, which is inside the Spring context, with a bean that is matching with the class data type as vehicle, and the same will be returned as an output. That's why on the left hand side, I can catch the output with the help of vehicle variable. Inside this vehicle object or vehicle bean, we should have the vehicle name also, because inside the project config, we set a name Tesla. If we get the same name, then it gives a confidence to us, okay, Spring created a bean from my vehicle object. The same it is trying to maintain inside the Spring context as well. Let's try to validate the same. For the same, I'm going to have a system.out.println. Inside the IntelliJ, we can type a shortcut which is SOUT to get a system.out.println. To this println method, I'm trying to pass an string which is vehicle name from Spring context is vehicle.getName. So this is going to print the name of the vehicle from the context. Can we try to fetch the beans of string and integer as well? Let's try to do the same. So here I'll try to mention the data type as string, and here on the left hand side I'm going to mention string with the variable name as hello. The same variable I'm going to use it here to display. Here instead of vehicle name, I'll just mention string value from Spring context. In the similar lines, let's try to get the bean of integer. What is the data type that we need to provide here? Integer. And on the left hand side, we should mention integer followed by, I'm going to mention the variable name as num. The same num I'm trying to print here. Let me change this value to integer. With this, we are good. Let me try to execute this program. To execute this program, I can select this arrow button and select either run or debug. Inside my console, we are able to see three different statements: vehicle name as Tesla, string value as hello world, and integer as 16. I hope now you are satisfied with the proofs and demos. This is one of the approach on how to define beans inside the Spring framework. Once the beans are created, we can do the dependency injection. All the topics related to dependency injection, auto wiring, we're going to discuss in the coming lectures. For now, for the next few lectures, let's try to focus on how to create beans inside the Spring framework by using various approaches. Before I try to close this lecture, let's try to open this getBean method. As you can see here, this getBean method, it is trying to return some generic value. But if you see here, I'm not doing any typecasting. I straight away assign the output from this getBean method to the vehicle object reference. So there should be some casting problem. But behind the scenes, Spring framework is taking care of the casting also. Since we have given a clue here that the bean data type is vehicle, behind the scenes, the casting will be taken care by the Spring framework. And by the time you get the output from this getBean method, the generic object will be converted into the vehicle object. The same is going to happen with the string and the integer as well. Let me try to mention some method comments around the same. So here I have highlighted that we don't need to do any explicit casting. Behind the scenes, Spring framework is going to take care of the same. In case if there is no bean matching with your data type, then obviously Spring is going to throw an runtime exception. Maybe let's try to see the demo as well. Here, instead of integer, I'll just try to be naughty and mention float. And here also, I'll just mention float as a return type. And if I try to execute this program, this time you can see I got an error saying that no qualifying bean of type java.lang.float. That's why always please make sure when you are using this bean method, there is a corresponding bean already created with the given data type. I'll go to the top of this method. Just above all this logic, I'm going to create a vehicle object normally. So here I'm trying to create the vehicle object and set a different name, which is Honda City. So whatever object that we have created here, it is not going to be converted as a bean and it is not going to be managed by the Spring framework, because here I didn't give any clue to the Spring framework to convert this as a bean. That's why whatever information that you have inside this vehicle object, it will be a simple Java object. So here I have mentioned a system.out.println saying that vehicle name from non-Spring context. Let me rename this vehicle to some other name because I'm getting a compilation error. The same variable I'm going to use here. Now, if I execute this program, whatever first statement that we have here, which is Honda City, this name is coming from an object which is not present inside the Spring context. Whereas the other name is coming from the Spring context because it is maintained as a bean by the Spring framework. I have prepared this slide for your reference on how to use the bean annotation. Anytime if you create an object using only new operator, that object will never be managed inside the Spring context. That's why on the left hand side, if you see, I have created an object of vehicle with a new operator, and this is not known to the Spring context. Whereas on the right hand side, I'm trying to use the bean annotation on top of a method which is going to return the vehicle object. Since I'm using this bean annotation, my Spring framework is going to maintain this object as a bean inside the Spring context. That is what I'm trying to convey using this graphical Spring context image. I hope this is all clear to you. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next lecture.